Hey, no one's in here, Nikki.
I know, but
Scare me like that.
oh yeah, we didn't start recording yet. Hey, we just want to test out the camera. Are the mics, guys? Are you ready? Okay, I'm gonna turn your mic off for now.
Sorry, Nikki, go ahead. I was just, took me a second to unmute.
One of us has to be there to communicate with Barrett. So
Hey.
Can you guys hear me okay?
I'm gonna Bluetooth that into my thing so that when we're talking to Barrett, I can hear him. Yeah, we can hear you, but only out of the computer. We probably want to hear you out of the mic, eh? Okay,
What
great.
you might have to change the output within Zoom.
Okay, so go to here, Jamie, go to mute, go to that arrow, go to audio settings. Okay, output, what do we have for selections? That's the speaker.
Yeah.
This is our mic, okay, so go here, okay.
Same as system.
Display audio, house phones. I wonder which one it would be, the speakers, stereo microphone, same as system. Intel display audio, what's that? Okay, talk to us, Barrett.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit.
Turn it on. That's the right one, you picked the right one.
We heard you loud and clear, Barrett.
Jenny, okay, so that's like how we change that, and so how's the mic going for you? You're good though, nice and clear? Does the
Yeah,
mic
what mic are you using?
actually right here, so if I'm here, I'm right at the mic, so whoever's,
Audio, all the speakers always need to be near that microphone.
okay.
Maybe move the microphone here.
Well, wherever it's Steven, it's just gonna be Steve and Dean, you
Yeah.
guys pick where,
Can
and
you hear me,
then,
Barrett?
Yep, I can hear you.
and standing position too, maybe we'll look at where.
And then you
you're-
remove that because it looks funny. All right, let me know what you think of the video, because it's really high, so I'm gonna move it low.
Okay, you'll put it that,
Yeah, it's kind of high.
How about now?
It's not too bad. Oh, that's better. Oh, now it's off.
oh, you must have pushed something to turn it off. Camera. Like to this little button when you were doing that?
Maybe unplugged it.
No.
I just went like that.
Yeah, I know. Let's do the other one off. Let me check on the, well, no, it's like it lost the camera, it's not off, right?
Are we off?
There, I don't know, you must have maybe were able to turn it off by there somehow, but it's back on, eh, Barrett?
Mhm.
It's on there.
So how much room do you have? Do they have,
Lots
right-
of room, like it spans from, I can see over there.
and you can see
Oh,
over
I'm
there?
gonna pin this so
Wow,
I can see.
okay.
Okay,
Pretty
So-
much, yeah.
they're gonna see whoever comes back here. I don't think
Nobody needs to
anybody's
be
gonna
back here.
have to be
No.
back here, so you can zoom that camera
Yeah.
in more if you wanted to. Like, this just gives you an idea of where you're at, and then you can tell it better for you to be standing. Or zoomed in, I mean. If she could do that part. But she did say that, Mackenzie said call her. Or not Mackenzie, is that what she said her name was?
I don't know. You don't see a zoom in, zoom out option. On Zoom itself, maybe.
Yeah, it looks a little bit high tech for sure. Why don't we,
This looks like a camera.
usually there's like a.
Anything in my teeth?
No.
What about that? Is that doing anything? No.
Holy, I was really close.
Yeah, it was quite close.
Okay, let's see, on here, I don't think we could zoom in. I could be wrong. But you guys, if you stand closer, just, I mean, obviously Jenny is,
In the way.
yeah.
Yeah, we could be right here. Here is fine. Is that gonna be over to here, all the way to here? So
And
we
I
can
mean,
both fit in
at
there.
some point, do they want to see who's here? Or you just turned it off, or,
Okay,
so you could even do that at some point if somebody needed to have a look at the audience.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can pull it like closer like this.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I think it's good. As long as it sounds good, and you said it was, and we can have
Cheryl raised hand. Sounds good. And then I'll just like move this thing like.
Well, no, we
Yeah, we
want to see
should,
it, so,
wanna see it.
yeah, it gives us a good like.
Can you
point of
mute
what-
it for
what
now?
we think.
Mute it
Yeah.
on that too.
I have to listen to our conversation, guys.
Yeah, they'll let us know if they need to do one more tap.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Treaty Week. We're now here talking in our post-secondary session of Treaty Week, and we have Chief Ogima Dean Sayers with us from Batchewana First Nation. And he's going to be talking to us about obviously treaties in Canada and specifically a treaty that's local to our area, the Robinson-Huron 1850 Treaty as well. So this is an open session. We want our viewers, yourself, to engage with this session and give us some questions. You can put them in the chat for now, and then we'll get to them in a second. But we'll start off with a bit of a chat with Chief Dean Sayers. He's going to give us a little bit of an overview of treaties in Canada, and then go a bit into the treaties specifically here for Treaty of the Robinson-Huron 1850, and give us a nice little overview, a little bit in depth into that, and then we get some questions later on. So, Chief Ogima Sayers, welcome. Thank you. Please give us an overview for our viewers of what your take is on treaties in Canada, why they're so important.
Miigwech Steve, Miigwech Kinwea, Ugaman Namanagojing Goyakasit Tishnakaz, Chief Dean. I'm the chief here in Bauting and Badranam, Batchewana, and I'm also from the Crane clan. And in our governance structure, the Crane clan has played a really predominant role throughout the evolution and maintenance of our inherent obligations since we were lowered here, and since we as a people took on the obligations and the responsibilities to look after that inheritance that included the land and the water and all of our relatives, all the fish, the trees, the moose, all of those relatives that are in the area, and it still looked to us for their protection, for their utilization, because they have roles, and all of creation was a part of our original instructions when we came here. And it wasn't that easy to maintain all of those inherent responsibilities through history. And even ourselves, there was a time when we had unintentionally wandered away from our instructions, and we ended up having some interactions that weren't so nice with some of our neighboring nations. But we did find our way back, and we'd come across another instance where we were once again challenged. But throughout those challenges, even some of the modern challenges with the modern visiting governments, we've been able to maintain some understanding of what those original instructions were. And the other thing that's been constant throughout the history was our ability to call on our blood memory, to call on our ancestors when we find gaps in our memory, to be able to ask them to help us better understand who we are and how we might best move forward through their guidance. And that includes treaties, that includes the relationships that were formalized in the treaties. And when we talk about formalization of commitments and promises today, a lot of times in mainstream, we talk about contract law or signing your name on something. And that kind of concept is really new. It's not a part of our history. The coming of the new people to our lands is really only in the last blink of an eye in creation, the last few hundred years. It's relatively new to us how the perception of the new people has had an impact, or tried to have an impact on how we envision our relationship. Treaties for us, we call them Wawindamagiwin. There is no real word for a treaty. It's promises that we make to each other. And when we make those promises, we do that in ceremony. And we do that in ceremony because we call on all of creation to witness and watch and listen to what we're committing to, what we're promising to do. And all of creation listens: the water, the trees, the rocks, the birds, the moose, the deer, the fish. Everything in creation observes and witnesses and expect us to follow through on what those promises look like. We also call on, during those ceremonies, we call on our ancestors to witness this. We call on them to guide us in the creation of the commitments that we're making and how we can best make sure that they are clear and that they're concise and how they need to be constructed. So those sacred agreements, when we call on all of creation to help us, we don't just start the discussions. We actually officially, formally call them there through different means in our ceremony. And then when we ask them to work for us, which we are doing when we call them there, we look after them. We feed them, we give them a drink of water, we smoke pipes with them. And we have some of our people share interpretations of what's happening from the perspective of the spirits that are working with us. When we enter into those sacred agreements, what has always been important for us is that when we sit in front of that fire, it's really important for us to connect spiritually with whoever we are having the spiritual or this promissory relationship with. And you come as a human, but there's your spirit that is also present when you come there. And our ancestors and our people believe strongly in those spirits having to connect, to have that extra layer of commitment and promise. And that's the strongest form of an agreement. It's stronger than like you see in movies where they cut each other's wrists and they have their blood connect and they have all these rituals out there. But for us, we have a very spiritual, historical relationship with the spirits. And having only been subjected to colonization for a couple of hundred years, a few hundred years, we have still been able to retain the gift of that communication with spirit. And the Nishnabek that are on the call know what I mean. When you're walking through Station Mall or you're walking down Yonge Street in Toronto or wherever you may be walking and you meet an Indigenous person, it's like your spirits connect and you give them the head bop and you give them the lip and because you recognize that they are even people that maybe not visible, that they may not visibly look like stereotypical Native, you still sense it. That's that spiritual connection that we still have because we've not really been without that spirit. Our spirit is still so close to us. And it's from that premise that we still honor in our relationships amongst each other. Even today with our modern treaties, when we struck our modern treaty with in the area here in 2011, we struck a modern treaty with the Sault Ste. Marie tribe, the Bay Mills tribe, Garden River and Botswana. And we all rode across in canoes across the water and we landed at the Pilgrims and we endorsed a treaty amongst ourselves, witnessed by all of creation. And we did ceremony all the way and we had a feast and we had pipes and we actually had an elder feed the spirit of Michel Bugeaud in the St. Mary's River, looking after so that no harm would come to us as we entered into the water, as we were making our way to treaty signing. That was still in 2011, still incorporating those teachings and ways of life that have been here for millennia. Since we were placed here, we didn't come here 20,000 years or 30,000 years. This is where we were placed. We have to get those mindsets away from us that we came from somewhere else. It's another way of the colonizers to displace us from our inheritance. Oh, you guys came from Africa. You guys came from monkeys. You guys came from Asia. You guys came from the Bering Straits. You guys came. No, you guys came from here. This is where creation started, right here in Baoting, in this part of the country, at the center of the world, at the center of the Great Lakes. So we have been here, and in our relationships that we've been striking for a very long time, they are entrenched by spirit. And when we get together and we talk about these formal promises to each other, we make sure our spirits meet. So when they started to talk about treaties a long time ago, and they wanted to have these promises between us, we said, well, sure, let's gather, let's get into our lodge here, let's make a fire, let's sit down, let's pray, let's call the ancestors, let's smoke our pipes, let's get ready and talk about this. Okay, so where's this person that wants to sign this treaty? Where's this king or this queen? Where is this person? Oh, they're over across the big water. Well, if they believe strongly in this treaty, if they believe strongly in this promise, our spirit has to connect. They have to be here. We can't just sign in absentia without them here. They have to be here. So they said, well, we can't do that. The king is not going to come here. But we have the mandate. We can do this. We can enter into this agreement with you. And he said, that's not going to work. So they walked away. And the elders were telling me this, and they walked away, and it didn't matter to us because we didn't have anything to lose, and we were comfortable with where we were. And So they didn't go far. They hung around and they watched us. They watched how we lived. They watched how we communicated. They watched our ceremony. They watched what was significant to us. They watched what was prominent in our worldviews. And what they ended up bringing back was these medals. And on the medal, they had the likeness of the king or the queen there. And they brought those medals to us and they said, well, he can't be here, but he sent his likeness. And we looked at that and we said, oh my God, like we didn't have mirrors. The thing that the elders told me is that we have a relationship with spirit. And there is a window into the spirit world through the shimmering shininess on the water when the sun or a reflection. That's a window into the spirit world. It's a beautiful world. It's a beautiful view that we get. You even know that when you go look at the sunset or you look at the water, it's just like glass. It's a window into our ancestors and our beautiful way of life, and all those spirits are in there. So they figure, well, if we use this really shiny metal and we put that likeness on there, and they put some kind of significant picture on the other side. So we looked at that, and apparently what I understood was that we had committed that we would enter into a treaty with them, that we would enter into these promises, knowing that they couldn't be here, but they sent their spirit here, and we were able to enter into an agreement based on the spirit joining us. So you'll see the pictures of the old chiefs, and they'll have these medals. They'll be holding up this medal in the picture. You'll see them with these medals all the time. And what the elders were telling me was that they're not bragging, look at the nice piece of silver I got. They're saying, I remember what you promised me. I remember what you said to me, and we're not going to forget. And I think it was Xinguang that said, the blood is red. The land is red from the blood of my ancestors who stood up and fought beside you in the defense of the freedoms of my people. Those kinds of things. And that's what they're talking about when they hold these medals up. It's a memory of the promises that we made to each other. And the organization that we've created is called Wawinimagwin, which is the promises. And that's just one of the little stories that we have in regards to how we entered into these promises and how important they are spiritually for our people. In these promises that we made to each other, we have what we call inherent obligations, inherent rights. And when we enter into these, these commitments to each other's, there is never, and you won't find a treaty amongst us here in the Anishinaabe where we've given up that inherent obligation. And by inherent, I mean it comes from the Creator, and we promise to fulfill responsibilities, and the next generation promised, and the next generation, and we all inherited those obligations. Even to today, when we talk about inherent responsibilities and obligations to look after the water, the trees, the fish, all of the animals, all of the spirits that come here, and the spirits that we ask to come here, and all the spirits that offer to come here, and all of creation is part of our original obligation that we took on. And we have huge responsibilities as a people, and we would never compromise those things. And you can see it in the Robinson-Huron Treaty, where we said, we're going to share with you, but we're going to keep, and we're going to do the things that we're in the habit of doing. And you see a little bit of a narrow interpretation that the colonizers put forward in the English documentation that's aligned with the promises, but it's not actually the promises that we know we had made to each other. And if you notice the way that treaty is designed, it's not designed in a way that is making a listing of jurisdictions. It was only about sharing copper. It was only about that natural resource and having access to that. And there are some words that don't even make sense in our language, and the concepts that are foreign to us. Like the word surrender only happens after war. There was no surrender. It wasn't even a part of our understanding of what was going on at the time. But there are interpretations that you see within the confines of the treaty documentation that are very conceptual and misaligned with how we envisioned it. So if you looked at the treaty, you'll see no reference to logging. You'll see no reference to health systems. You'll see no reference to schools. It's because it was only about those particular areas that they needed access to, and they needed a treaty in order to legalize their use of the lands. Actually, in 1850, we provided an endorsement of the people living here in Sault Ste. Marie. And we said, we'll share that, and you can live there, but we're reserving the rest of this territory, all the way from Baoting, Sault Ste. Marie, all the way up to Pukasau Marathon for Batchewana, all the way around to the high water mark of Lake Superior, up towards Ranger Lake and back down to Sault Ste. Marie. That's our reserve. We're reserving that for ourselves. We're keeping it. We'll share a little bit of the resources, but that's ours. We're reserving that for ourselves. We're keeping it for ourselves. That's for our sole benefit. And we're going to reserve this land here in Sault Ste. Marie for you people in Sault Ste. Marie. So actually, it's the other way around. It's actually Sault Ste. Marie who lives on the reserve, and we kept all the rest. But somehow education and their systems has conditioned us to think that we're the ones that have the reserve left over. But if you look at the actual understanding that we have as a people, and when you start to talk to the representatives of the Crown about this, so they get a little scared of what the possibilities are of the reality, because they don't have a receipt for everything they claim they have. There's nothing in the treaty. There's nothing that I can find. And I say, if you have a receipt for forest management, show me and you can look after it. But until that time, we're taking it back. We're not asking you, you stole it from us. We're taking it back. If you believe it's yours, you prove that it's yours. Why should the onus be on us to prove what was ours that we inherited from the creator? Same with lake specific claims. They stole all that land. We won't enter into a specific claims process. Why should we have to prove that we were here and what we were doing with that before they were here? We reserve that land under our inherent right, and we will manage that right as our inheritance. And if Canada believes that they have an interest there, when you make a specific claim to us, why should we have to claim to you? And we'll take it back, and then you give us our land back. And we will also, in that inventory, make sure that we also look after any extractors and make sure that they do that in a kind way that isn't going to harm the earth. And that if there's any benefits to be reaped from that, we as a people will benefit. And if there's any left over, you can have some as the visitors to these lands, but our people are first. Those are the kind of conceptual perspectives that we are rolling towards as leadership. We are so far from the way we had initially envisioned the treaty relationship to evolve. And so we did enter into those treaties. We entered into some agreements. We never really, it wasn't really for us. The Robinson-Huron Treaty wasn't for us. We didn't need the treaty. And I'll tell you another story about that in a few minutes, but I'll pause for now. I think you're okay, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's great story, great information for our viewers. Just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions for Chief Dean Sayers here, just please throw them into the chat. We will get to them shortly. And I just wanted to bring attention that we are coming to you from Algoma U, and the significance of Algoma U and this building of what it was beforehand, and what the vision of Shinwalk was for this place beforehand. And I think it's important to kind of touch on that. Like you said, the perceptions and what's been taught to us is now different, but that history is starting to get told like through these type of sessions now that you're here talking and telling the true stories of what these treaties actually mean. How important is that to you to think that we need to get this into our students' curriculum at post-secondary level, at maybe the grade school level? You know, how important is it to get that education to our younger folks that are going through school right now and the upcoming generations?
Oh, it's hugely important, and we are really doing our best to make sure that it's not just these one-offs and these presentations once a year, but we're working on curriculum in the elementary, high school. We're working with the university faculty and professors to try and ensure that they are telling the stories that need to be told in this particular area from the Indigenous people in this area, as an example. And we find some real value with Algoma University, who are kind of carrying the baton here right now in a lead role with Indigenous education. And since Shinwalk's vision, that has evolved and taken turns, all working towards that eventual teaching wigwam that would help our people maintain that place that we had always expected our people to be, and being able to live a quality of life that was promised to us when we entered into these promises. In addition to Algoma University, part of that vision was the establishment more recently of Shinwalk Kinawangegumik, which is the new accredited degree granting university here on the same site in Baoting and Sault Ste. Marie, and that university is just across the road here, and we've got some waterfront property, and we do offer some programs. And we have a dynamic board of directors, and we also have incredible faculty, Indigenous faculty, and a lot of our friends and allies from many cultures around the world are also helping us there. And I'm the chair of the board right now, and it's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to, in whatever way I can, ensure that the Baoting perspective on the relationship, the Robinson Huron, Robinson Superior perspective is told and taught within as much as I can through encouragement of our faculty to adopt those kinds of concepts into what they teach people from around the world. And I think it's probably the best place to make the focus is in the educational system. So I do go and speak a lot of places, but if everybody was being able to speak about it, that would go so much farther. The only, I guess, downside of that is I am concerned about some of the resources that people are looking to in order to develop curriculum, because there really isn't much out there that comes from us from a cultural perspective. I think there's a lot of people that consider themselves to be Indigenous experts, but I kind of wonder because there's different kinds of legal perceptions in Canada. There is the Indigenous law as per the Canadian Constitution, and then there's Anishinaabe law, our culture, our inherent law, our Constitution based on natural law. And there are Canadian laws, and we are really looking towards the empowerment and reclaiming the original nationhood rights that we have never extinguished or have never been extinguished. We still draw on, and all of creation expects us to work from. So we don't find ourselves in the future under a Canadian Constitution because we're not Canadian Indians. We are Indigenous nations. We were never France's Indians, United States Indians, or Britain's Indians. We are a nation that entered into formal relationships and promises as nations. Our relationships that we struck through treaties or these promises are of international stature. They are international, global, nation-to-nation obligations that are recognized around the world. They can't be recognized and put under as a domesticated relationship under Canada's Constitution under Section 35. What happens if Canada changes their government next year and they decide to change their constitution? Because that's what they do. Not like ours. Our laws are based on natural law. And whether or not we like the color of the leaves changing in the fall, we can't do nothing about it. We can't change law next year with the next chief and say, we're going to make the leaves all stay the same color year round. Canada does that with their laws. Whoever's in there, they change their law. They'll change Section 35. They'll put Section 38. They change all that stuff. There's no foundation, no stability for us under foreigners' law, under Canada's law. So we have to maintain our relationship with the Creator, and it can't be clouded by any secondary or tertiary government like Canada or Ontario. We have inherent law, and we make sure that we protect that as much as we can. And now, since it's legal for us to talk, and it's legal for us to get educated in these kinds of places, we're finding out that there is even more that we have reserved as rights that we can be looking to in order to be able to propel our people into the place that we're supposed to be today. We shouldn't be living in squalor. We shouldn't be living in poverty. We shouldn't be filling the jails. There is a place that we had envisioned through not only Shingwak and Nunamigosing's visions, but through the visions of a lot of ancestors that foretold that we were going to be at some point in our evolution. So yeah, it's pretty cool where we're at, but where we're going. So education is definitely where we need to be focused.
I think it's very cool we're having this conversation in these hallways and where we're at now in history. So it's really great to be having these conversations moving forward. So I just want to look to see if we have some questions. We do have a couple students in the crowd. Does anybody here have a question for Ogima Seres? Looking your way, Star. Anything at all?
We have one from the chat.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go to our chat line. and see
We
what
do
we
have
got
a
there.
comment saying, yes, we need to develop the curriculum and oversee the same curriculum. And then we do have the question saying, is there a treaty with our winged hooded crawlers relations?
Are there treaties?
Or is there a treaty with our winged hoofed crawlers relations?
I don't know if you call it a treaty, but we do have promises that we've made. We have promises that we made to the creator. We have promises that we made to all the animals that we would look after and support them, much like they supported us. And throughout our history, there was times when we needed their support and they helped us. And we have that obligation. Yet, if you could call that a treaty, I guess that's what we're talking about, was those internation, because those are nations too. They have their own way of life and they have their own freedoms and they have inherent obligations that were given to them by the creator. They just never forgot theirs. We kind of sometimes forget our original inherent obligations, but they don't. Like, you don't see them laying on the couch playing Xbox or playing whatever on their laptops. They remember what they're supposed to be doing. So we really need to take stock too and inventory and start to work on our own fulfillment of those obligations.
So you mentioned something earlier about blood memory and how important that is for us to get back into those ceremonies and to reach out to spirit to help us fill in some of those gaps. Can you speak a little bit more to the blood memory and how that works and the importance of it, and how that's come into play for the Robinson Huron Treaty and the litigation committee, and how this has all been playing out and integrated together?
Okay, how much time we got?
How much time we got? For
We've got still about a half hour.
Okay.
Can answer that and then we have a few more.
Okay. So when the people of Badgerong, Bawating and Anishinaabe from here, this was a permanent village. But there was a number of our people and families that would move up and down the coast, whether it be out at Numcasing, or they call that Nimkiwapong, which is where the Thunderbirds resting place is, out on the west end of Sault Ste. Marie, where it opens up into Lake Superior. Or you keep going up a little farther to Chihuahua Uli Mission, or Badranung, or Namasing, or to Munyazibi, or Guayo, or Nanabojang. All those village sites, we were moving along that area, along the shore of Lake Superior as fishermen, the people from here. We looked after ourselves, but we also fed people from all over North America that would come here. So we had traded, we harvested, we looked after the fishery, and we did that in a sustainable way. So there was villages all along there. Likewise, similarly to the east of us, there was villages all along the Georgian Bay, all the way along Lake Huron, all the way towards the French River, up the river up towards Nipissing. And when they left their villages and they started to consider contemplating a treaty relationship, they had ways of making sure that the expectations of our ancestors, the expectations of our ancestral leadership, the expectations of our community members, the expectations of the grandmothers, the grandfathers, the women, the youth, the men, everybody in the village needed to have a say in how things would happen when they were having discussions at council fire, when we had a council fire. And we had council fires all the time. It wasn't just about treaty. But when we would come to these council fires, what I understood what happened was that before they left the village, whichever village they were coming from, they would get a log. They'd get a log and they would bring that log to the center of the community, and they'd ask the community members to touch that log or instill in that log what they wanted to see happen at the council fire, what they wanted to be expressed at the council fire, what they wanted to have discussed at the council fire. And their leadership would leave home, and that would be the wishes and the expectations that they would bring. It was the people's wishes and expectations. And when they got here, each community would burn that block of wood, put it on the fire, the central council fire, and that's what built the council fire. And that's what fed the spirit and fed the people in the narratives that were shared and the commitments that were made and the discussions that were had. It was based on spirit and it was guided by spirit. And those are blood memory. Those are how we communicated. That was how we communicated. We spoke and we used spirit and we travel spiritually. And if we need something today, it's within each one of us as a Anishinaabe. We can reach back and we can bring that to the forefront today. And we can do that because we are connected by blood all the way back by spirit. It's such a beautiful, wonderful connection that we still have. And that's how I envision blood memory. We had always had this connection. And I think that's what guided us at the promise gatherings that we had, wherever that might have been, whether it be here or Manitowoc or wherever other treaties were or promises were made. It was those types of ceremonies that maybe at the time when the discussions were happening, they felt as the settlers or the colonizers that we got them this time. We got what we wanted. We got this agreement. And lo and behold, in 2021, we realized that, wow, look, as an Anishinaabe, look what we have in these agreements. Look at the extent of the foresight of our ancestors, the things that we have in here that are still protected, that are still inherent, that are still ours. And there was no extinguishment. They're still here for us. It's really powerful to understand the concepts that were incorporated into those agreements. Powerful treaty agreements, because when we go into the courtroom now, there's no defense of the way the Canadian government or the provincial government is treating us. If people online take a look at the transcripts of the stage 1 and stage 2 of the litigation regarding the annuities, you'd be shaking your head thinking, what are they doing? They don't know what they're talking about, the experts that come from Canada. Ontario. There's no justification for the way they're acting. Parliamentary supremacy, doctrine of discovery, theft of our nationhood is not a justified reason to exercise unlawful jurisdiction or an ill concept of sovereignty. It's so far from what we really have and what is founded and documented and historically remembered through blood memory and through our elders today. So when they see us coming to the courtroom, they're not very happy about the possible outcomes, are even more so than possible, I think, the reality of the outcomes. And very soon we're going to see some of those outcomes again, because there's decisions that are going to be coming from the Ontario Court of Appeal in regards to Ontario dragging their heels, don't want to pay the rent, don't want to pay their promises. Meanwhile, we're living in squalor and they're all living pie in the hollow. I was in London, England a few years ago. You should see the glass buildings that they built over there out of our beaver pelts. We suffered. They ripped us off. So, and it was facilitated by the Hudson's Bay Company. Another horror story for our people. So I have my own I guess it would be prejudices sometimes, and I think they're founded. And I really encourage people to look around at what's happening. Are you a part of that? Are you a part of those types of modern day, I guess, absconding of Indigenous people and their quality of life? So we today are in a different place. And it's a wonderful place, and our people are starting to be a little more optimistic. The glass is half full a lot of times for us now, and it's nice to be able to help with bringing that message out there.
And I think it's very important that people get back and tap into that blood memory in different ways, like you mentioned, whether it's being quiet, being still, watching that sunset, or getting into ceremony, or just sitting by the fire and being still and being quiet helps tap into that blood memory, and that those our inherent rights start coming back to us.
People know when they connect with that. It's really a powerful feeling when that happens, and it gets me teared up once in a while when it happens to me, when something really powerful happens, and I know it's spirit. I know it's there. I know it's somebody that was behind me that was here before, or sending me messages like this hat. This hat, each one of these feathers is a different ancestor from here that has offered to work with me in this job. And they guide me wherever I go. And I was tired tonight, but I decided I was going to wear my hat because I needed that additional guidance in the words that I share. And it lifts your spirit, and And it helps you share what you need to share, because these guys, each one of them help. Each one of them shares something with me and speaks through me. And it's a connection to the spirit world and vice versa. And that's why we wear these hats. The chiefs wear these hats, and you have to think about, it's hard to wear these hats. You have to think about it. You have to pray about it. You have to be of kind mind. You have to be humble. You have to connect. You have to allow to think from the heart. And I do that. I try my hardest to wear this hat the way it's supposed to be worn, so that the people will benefit from that. And if I'm not in a good mind and I wear my hat, nobody's going to benefit. So it's when you see the chiefs wearing those hats, that's what's going on. They wear them because it is a connection with spirit. It's not look at me and whatever. It's actually a tool. It's a helper, much like the Selah that was given to me. That helps me. It wakes me up. It keeps me revived. It encourages me. It empowers me. It helps me. These things help us, much like other things that I do to make sure that I'm really reflecting the best I can. Because in these times, it's really important for us to be as open and as sharing as we can for people, so that we can really change the script for our people. Last night at our council meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about homelessness. Like, it's really terrible. And we have promises that were made to us that we would not have to deal with these types of issues as a people. The Crown and the people that come to our lands, you have to remember that we had our own economy before they came here. Our people were living on average to be 150 years old. We were able to see 3 Halley's Comets, 75 years apart. And I said, wow, that's a long time. That's 225. He said, no. When you're born, you see one. When you're 75, you see one. And when you're 150, you see one. And when you're born, you can see 7 generations ahead to the 150-year-old people. And when you're 150, you can see 7 generations behind. And that was Eddie Benton that told me that. And he said, that's where that 7 generations came from. That's what we have responsibility for. That's how long and how in sync we live with our environment, with our world, with creation, with the animals. We had an incredible quality of life. We had trading patterns. We had educational systems. We had governance systems. We had everything in place. Before this treaty was signed in Sault Ste. Marie, we were issuing mining permits. We were issuing logging permits. We were managing the resources. We were not like financially wealthy, but we were wealthy as a people. Everybody was wealthy with a good quality of life, lots of food, good social systems, good governance. And we said we'd share that. That's how we envisioned the relationship. We weren't expecting our people. We expected that quality of life to be maintained as we move forward from the treaty, and it never did. It started to go down right from 1851, the year after, when we petitioned and says, you're not honoring their promises to us, right from the year after. So we remember, and it wasn't supposed to be like that. The treaty promises, the poverty that we dealt with last night, the homelessness in our communities, people getting cold, coming out of the bush behind our villages because they can't live there anymore, it's too cold. Like 2021, people are still suffering and living in the bush, our native people, and they don't want to be there, but there's no alternative. We have 250 people on our waiting list for housing. Poverty and homelessness, and it's not only with us, it's everywhere. I look at Native people downtown at City Hall right now, I hear that it's 90% of the people that are homeless downtown are Indigenous people. That's not the plight, that's not the promise, that's not where we were supposed to be today. And every government you talk to, that's not ours, that's not ours. I think. So yeah, we have to make a change, and the politicians need to understand that it's their people, the Canadians, that want that change. We tell them that has to happen, but they want to listen to their voters. So any voters out there that voted in the Canadian system, tell your leaders, change the script. This is not where we're supposed to be with the promises that were made on my behalf as a Canadian. I'm not saying I'm a Canadian, but the Canadians, they have these expectations. So far from what we were told when we moved to this land where these beautiful Indigenous people are, beautiful lands, and the way they're being treated, that's not at all the way we knew and the way Canada is being sold around the world. So yeah, they want the leadership to change. So talk to Ford, talk to Trudeau. Like, is Trudeau gonna go on a surfing trip on November 11th for the Remembrance Day for their lost people?
Right.
He went surfing on the first national holiday for our people that are suffering as a result of residential schools. That first national day of recognition, he decided to go surfing out on the west coast right next to one of our villages. That was just a slap in the face. So is that what Canadians want? Tell your politicians. Then changing government isn't going to change it. It's going to mean changing the mindset of all of those people that are in your governments. They have to be nonpartisan, and nonpartisanship is going to come from Canadians talking to their leadership about what they expect them to do in regards to this beautiful people that are on these lands and are still flourishing and still have expectations and rights as people, as a nation.
That's why these talks are so important. That's why we're having them tonight. So we got any more questions from our gallery and our chat room?
Yeah, so we have one stating, can Chief Sayers elaborate on the modern treaty with Sault Ste. Marie Tribe and Bay Mills? What did it entail?
It was in regards to water.
And then the following question says, will RHT take a critical role pertaining to the federal water agency being proposed to be situated here in Bawitang?
Federal Water Agency or Anishinaabe Water Agency?
Federal water agency.
What federal, as in the federal government of the Anishinaabe or federal government of the settler governments? I think I'm just playing with you. I know what you mean. So we signed a treaty with the Sioux tribe, Batchewana, Garden River, and Bay Mills, and we all share the water here. What happens to one happens to all of us, and there are so many major like polluting industries on the water, and not only here but up the lake and all around, like Tannery Bay, where they used to tend hides here on the American side, just west of the bridge. It's one of the hot zones in North America. St. Mary's River. So we committed that we would, from that 2011, we would reclaim our inherent obligation to look after the water. And we would do that from a nationhood perspective, and that we would stand with each other when there were going to be any encroachments that would possibly have an effect on the water, including the sewage that was being released in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. If you recall, a few years ago, when they get a lot of rain, if you were downstream, you'd see these big O. Henry bars and Mr. Big bars floating down the river, and needles and condoms, and they were all coming through the sewage system, and they were floating down the river, Sugar Island. It was terrible, and that's when we decided that we needed to take a stand. And we managed through that treaty to make changes to have at least partially lobby and invoke our unextinguished nationhood rights to see the changes happen with the East End Sewage Treatment Plant in Sault Ste. Marie. We also, with the new Super Walmart in Sioux, Michigan, there was, they were Ashman Creek. They were going to design the parking lot at Walmart so that all the water, all the way the grade goes with the parking lot would all erode and would all wash into Ashman Creek on the edge of their property. And we didn't allow that to happen because it was all going to end up, there was salt and sand and whatever off the cars. So those were some of the things that we did. And
And that was all part of the modern treaty.
that was the modern treaty. We committed this to ourselves as parties to that, as the original peoples of these lands that have the original inherent obligation. There's also a modern promise that we made amongst 133 First Nations called the Water Declaration. And what that basically said was that all the waters, including the waters of the Great Lakes, were never surrendered in any treaty to any of the neighboring states or tribes around the Great Lakes, and that we will be exercising inherent jurisdiction and sovereignty over the Great Lakes. And that they would need our permission if they were going to move forward with any extraction or any removal of any water from the watershed, including any of the industries, needed our permission. We were really concerned with things like the St. Clair River, when they dredged the St. Clair, which opened up the levels. There was in Chicago, there was another tunnel that was taking water out. We're worried about Asian carp. There's a lot of things that were not being properly looked after through the theft of the Great Lakes by the settler government. there is the Ontario, the Canada agreement, or there's they call it the Great Lakes Accord that was struck by, and it's partly it goes back to the International Joint Commission, which was set up by the United States and Canada, which really acted contrary to our unextinguished jurisdiction. So actually, at one point, I called for the dismantling of the International Joint Commission, which was made up of president appoints board members and the prime minister, and they look after the Great Lakes, and they look after things like under the St. Mary's Bridge there, the International Bridge, you'll see those compensating gates. Those compensating gates here in Sault Ste. Marie actually control the water flow of all the Great Lakes, and there's maybe 15 of these gates, and they open up and allow for different levels of flow throughout the rest of the Great Lakes. And in my mind, the way I understood, it was purely non-political, but the board that did it were all appointed by corporate interests, by the governments of Canada and the United States, the president and the prime minister. So it was causing for an erosion of the environment, and so I call for the dismantling, but we also collectively maintain our water declaration. And there's the Canada-Ontario agreement, and we're looking at right now. Next week we're meeting, and we're talking about the what do they call that on Lake Erie? There's some of that green algae that's on the shoreline of Lake Erie. That is not a natural happening. And we're looking at ways of reducing that. But what the Indigenous people have within this structure is an advisory committee to the advisory committee. Like if there's 10 ladders all the way up to the decision making, we're on the bottom 9 and 10, the 10 steps. And it's really inappropriate. It's misaligned with who we are. So there is a battle there. And we need the Indigenous leadership to not settle and to demand a recognition of our unextinguished jurisdictions. All of creation expect us to do that. And we have treaties with, like we said, with all the animals, the trees, the water, that we would do our part. And right now it's so distant from us because we weren't allowed to do much when it was first struck. It was illegal for us to say anything, but now we can. So I'm hoping that we'll find a lot of our leadership on these interactions with the settlers, and we'll make those changes so that it can better reflect what we as a people reserve as our jurisdiction, not only in the treaties with the British, but the treaties with the Americans.
Strong leadership is going to be key for sure moving
Yeah.
forward. Do we have any more questions or comments from our chat room, our students?
Somebody said, this is a wonderful educational event. What would you want everyone not here tonight to know?
What I was telling the kids today in the high schools, I was telling them that ask questions. Don't always take everything that everybody says at school with face value. Question the teachers, ask them why, and encourage people to ask questions. I also would hope that prior to the coming of the new people, we had sent an entourage down to the East Coast, and we stayed down there quite a while, but we listened to prophecies. And one of the prophecies was that there was going to be these big canoes that were going to come, and they were going to be pushed by the clouds. And they would come, and be careful, because the people on those canoes were going to have two faces. And befriend one and be careful of the other, because they're going to try and rob our inheritance. They're going to try to take things away on us. So for us, that was the tall ships that were going to come. But we also understood that they were going to come and they were going to stay, and that we had to share with them. We had to be receptive to them. We had to be cooperative. We had to be kind mind, kind body, kind spirit. We had to be of that mind with the people that were going to come. We had to be tolerant with them. And I went to a gathering, One Dish, One Spoon, a few years ago, and an elder was talking about that. And he said, when that big ship floated into the river, and they saw it, and they said, "Oh, you stay on your boat there. We're going to come on. We're going to talk to you for a minute." And they went out and I looked at them, and he said, "Stay here. We have to go and deliberate. We have to go and talk." So they went and talked. And what they did was that one of their spiritual people decided that he was gonna go find out where they came from. So he took the form of a turtle and he went in the water and he swam down the river and he went all the way down. He went across the water over to England. And when he went over there, he looked up and he looked around and he saw hundreds of these big canoes that had been pushed by the clouds. And he came back. He said, they're coming and they're coming and they're coming and they're not going to stop coming. So we have to make accommodation. We have to be tolerant with them. We have to be accepting of them. And so we went, when he got back, and we went and talked to people on the ship. And we said, you're going to stay in your ship and you're going to have your own way of life. You're going to have your own people, your own law. You're going to have your own religion. You're going to have everything that defines a nation you will have. And you keep that in your boat. And in our canoe, we're going to have our own way of life, our own culture, our own spirituality, our people, our law, and our land. And that was the beginnings of the two-row, how we would go down the river of life, each in our own canoe, and each in their boat and us in our canoe down these rivers, and never would our paths cross. We would maintain our own way of life. But after the story, the others, did you pick up on the one thing? He said they didn't bring any land with them. It was our land. He said the only land they brought with them was the land under their fingernails. He said, and all they still have, it's still ours. It's our inheritance. It's our land. And that's the essence of the two-row. Yes, but they don't own the land. We have an inheritance with the land to fulfill to all of creation. So I told the kids today, I said, we have to be tolerant. All of us have promised and committed to being tolerant of each other. So if you see something different about somebody, don't bully them, don't tease them, try to understand them, talk to them. I remember as a kid, I used to get teased because we had wood stove when I grew up, and my clothes and my coat, everything would smell like smoke. And I went to school in the city. We drove 50 miles a day on the bus, and the kids were, ooh, stinky, stinky. And they're like, oh, you Indians are so stinky, and you all like it. And it was really hurtful, and it was kind of bullying you. And after I learned about fire, I learned about wood, I learned about those gifts, and I learned really beautiful concepts about wood, and how that spirit of the wood has been able to help our people. And we are a different culture, and there are many different cultures from around the world that are here now. So if you find as newcomers to our lands, try to be like us, try to be open to the differences, try to embrace the differences of all the people from around the world, and say hi to them and say, like, is that ever interesting how your clothes are so different than ours? Can you tell me about it? And there's such beautiful stories in what people have and what people wear and who they are, how they wear their hair. Like, we need to be more tolerant. So I think that's important for us today on these lands that we offered and committed to sharing. And I'm hoping that we can find a better, safer place for our people, so that we're not afraid of people hurting us because we're different, or taking advantage of us, or hurting our women, hurting our children. And by the way, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Week, so let's do our part to bring more light to this issue this month and year round. But that would be probably the biggest message that I want to share is tolerance, and we got to stop this hurt that we do to each other, and this bullying.
I think that's a very good, strong message to end off our session tonight. So I don't think there's any more questions from the rest of our crew tonight. So a great session. Again, Chimig Glitch, Ogie upstairs for joining us and gracing us with so much good info tonight. It was really good. And for our viewers out there, don't forget, Treaty Week still going on, so be sure to tune in as well for more events and check out our agenda for those times.
Watch the news in the next couple of days. There's going to be some incredible, beautiful news that's coming out. I'm very positive and optimistic about some of the stuff that's going on right now. So watch, some good things coming for everybody. Miigwech, Bamapi, Guaman.
Bamapi.